My wife accused me of cheating, then found the proof of who really was. She slammed the phone on the counter and demanded to know who the woman was. At first, I thought she was joking. I am 33 years old, a project manager for a logistics company. My wife, Tanya, is 31 and works as a marketing consultant. We have been married for 5 years. We have no children yet, though we had been trying for almost a year. The pressure of it had changed something between us. Tanya had always been slightly possessive. She would scroll through my phone when I left it unlocked, tease me about my female coworkers sending too many messages, and sometimes go silent when I came home late. I ignored it, thinking it was just her way of expressing insecurity. I believed love could handle a little paranoia. Over time, the pattern shifted. She became secretive. Her phone was always face down on the table. She smiled at her screen more often, then quickly swiped things away when I walked in. I started noticing her late-night calls that ended abruptly when I entered the room. I asked once, half laughing, what she was hiding. She rolled her eyes and said I was being paranoid. That night, I brushed it off again, but something in my gut began to ache with doubt. The distance between us grew without words. Meals turned into silence. Affection became mechanical. Then one evening, as I came home from work, she called me into the living room with a strange tone in her voice. Her face was pale, trembling. On the television was a picture from a company dinner. Someone had tagged me on social media. I was hugging a coworker, congratulating her for a promotion. The caption was nothing more than best team ever. But Tanya stood there shaking, convinced she had found proof of betrayal. I tried to explain. The woman was engaged, the hug was innocent, and the event was professional. None of it mattered. Tanya's eyes were cold, and her voice was sharp as she accused me of humiliating her. She asked how long it had been going on, who else knew, why I was lying. I stayed quiet, realizing nothing I said would reach her. That night, she threw her ring on the couch and told me to pack a bag. I didn't argue. I took my keys and left. I drove aimlessly for hours before stopping at a friend's apartment. The streets were empty, and the silence in my chest felt heavier than her words. I kept thinking about how quickly trust could turn to suspicion. The next morning, I woke up to a flood of messages from her. Long paragraphs, voice notes, screenshots of conversations with her best friend where they dissected my supposed affair. I ignored them. I went to work, buried myself in meetings, tried to pretend my world hadn't just fallen apart. 3 days later, she sent one final message that said I would regret lying to her. I didn't reply. I assumed she was trying to provoke a reaction, to make me chase her and prove my innocence. But what happened next changed everything. That same evening, my friend called me sounding uneasy. He told me I should look at a post circulating online. When I opened it, my hands went cold. It was a series of screenshots shared by someone I barely knew. The screenshots showed messages between Tanya and another man. The name made my stomach twist. It was her coworker, someone she often said annoyed her. The messages were explicit, filled with photos, hotel bookings, and months of hidden exchanges. It hit me all at once. She had accused me because she was the one cheating. Every argument, every accusation, every tear had been projection. I didn't call her. I didn't confront her. There was no need. Her betrayal had already gone public. Friends started sending me messages of shock and pity. Her own best friend deleted her social accounts after being tagged in the scandal. I went back to the house the next day only to collect my belongings. She tried to speak, but I walked past her in silence. I emptied our joint account, half of which was my salary, and left her a note that said I hoped she found what she was looking for. Then I blocked her everywhere. A week later, I used that money to pay for my mother's long-delayed surgery. It felt like the universe had rearranged itself. The pain was still there, but it no longer owned me. I had proof now, not just of her lies but of my strength. When I look back, I realized the signs had been there all along. Her distance, her defensiveness, her sudden obsession with accusing me. I had mistaken control for care, suspicion for love. That night when she screamed at me asking who the woman was, she was really looking at her own reflection. And that was the night everything changed forever. She stood in the middle of the living room, waving her phone like it was evidence in a trial. Her voice trembled with fury as she asked if I thought she was stupid. I had seen her angry before, but never like this. There was something wild in her eyes, something that told me no amount of logic would bring her back. I tried to speak calmly, to explain that the picture she had found online was harmless. It was taken at a company dinner, And the woman beside me was not a secret lover, but a coworker who had just received a promotion. The hug lasted less than a second. Yet to her, it was the end of our marriage. She began pacing back and forth, her breath sharp and uneven. She said she had been feeling something off for months, that I had become distant, that my silence meant guilt. I reminded her that I had been working late to secure a major contract that would allow us to travel, something she had always dreamed of. My words did not matter. The more I tried to reason with her, the louder she became. She threw her ring onto the couch, her hands shaking, and told me to go live with the woman who apparently made me happy. There was a moment of quiet after that, a silence so heavy it filled the room. I looked at her and realized she had already made her decision. I said calmly that if she truly believed that story, then nothing I could say would change it. I grabbed my jacket, my keys, and walked out without another word. I drove aimlessly for a while, the city lights blurring through the windshield. I ended up at my friend Omar's apartment. When he opened the door, I must have looked exhausted because he didn't even ask questions. He offered a drink, but I declined. I sat on his couch, staring at the floor, trying to understand how trust could vanish overnight. The woman I had built a life with had turned into someone I didn't recognize. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face twisted in anger. I kept wondering what had triggered this sudden storm. Jealousy does not appear without a spark. Something, or someone, had fed her doubts. The next morning, my phone was flooded with notifications. Dozens of missed calls and long messages filled with accusations. She sent paragraphs about betrayal, screenshots of conversations with her best friend Lisa, where they picked apart my every move. They analyzed who commented on my posts, which colleagues I smiled at, and what time I got home each night. It was like reading a stranger's version of my life. I ignored every message. Responding would only feed her obsession. Days passed in uneasy quiet. I stayed focused at work, but my mind was never fully there. My coworkers noticed something was wrong, but I kept my answers short. Then, 3 days later, during a meeting, my phone buzzed with one short message from Tanya. It said that I would regret lying to her. I felt a familiar ache in my chest, but said nothing. I put the phone face down and tried to concentrate. 2 hours later, the universe answered her message for me. My colleague Nadia walked into the office holding her phone, looking pale. She asked if I had seen the latest post online. Confused, I took her phone and looked at the screen. It was a social media post from Lisa's husband. He had shared screenshots that no one expected. The messages were between his wife and Tanya. They weren't about me. They were love messages between the two of them and a man they both knew. The man was Tanya's coworker, the one she had once called irritating and intrusive. The texts were explicit, filled with affection, and proof of months of secret meetings. There were even hotel confirmations and photos. My breath caught as I scrolled. Every accusation she had thrown at me now pointed straight back at her. I understood everything then. Her guilt had been too heavy to carry, so she had tried to throw it at me. I left the office and sat in my car, staring at nothing for a long time. There was no anger, only disbelief. I realized she had been preparing her story in case she was caught, painting me as the unfaithful one so no one would suspect her. But now the mask had slipped. The truth was out in public, and she had no control left. That evening, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't her. Friends began sending links, asking if I was all right. People were commenting on the post, expressing shock and disgust. In a few hours, her perfect image had shattered. When she finally reached me, it was through a mutual friend. She asked if we could talk, said she wanted to explain. I told her there was nothing left to explain. She called again that night from a different number. Her voice was softer, almost pleading. She said she was sorry, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she loved me. I hung up without a word. Some words don't deserve an answer. The following week, she tried a new tactic. She began posting online. Her captions were vague, but sharp enough to target me without saying my name. Quotes about men who can't handle strong women, messages about freedom and self-love, pictures of her laughing with friends at cafes. For the first time, I saw clearly how much of our relationship had been performance. Everything she did was for an audience. Now that she had lost her stage, she was trying to rebuild it with sympathy. I refused to play the villain in her story. Instead of defending myself, I stayed silent. Then, on a quiet Wednesday morning, I posted one photo of my own. I stood in front of the new office my firm had opened downtown, holding a silver plaque that read partner. My caption was simple. Some surprises are worth the wait. Within minutes, her mutual friends started liking it. Within hours, she deleted 3 of her posts. 2 days later, a former colleague of hers called me. He said HR had opened an internal investigation into her department. Someone had leaked the same photos I received, and her boss was being transferred out of state. She had taken a leave of absence, citing mental stress. Apparently, mixing business with pleasure had consequences she hadn't anticipated. I felt no joy in hearing it, only a quiet confirmation that life has a way of balancing the scales. I used the following weeks to rebuild my own rhythm. I moved into a smaller apartment closer to the office. It was quiet but peaceful. No makeup scattered on the sink, no endless perfume smells, no forced smiles over dinner. I replaced the furniture one piece at a time, choosing things that felt like me rather than us. I cooked again, rediscovered old hobbies, and started running every morning before work. Each small act was a reminder that solitude can be a gift when shared life becomes a prison. Friends who once pitied me began to see the difference. They said I looked lighter, more alive. I laughed more, worked better, even started mentoring new architects at the firm. I didn't talk about Laura anymore. She belonged to a version of me that no longer existed. A month after the papers were finalized, I received a message from her old number. It was a single line. I never thought you would actually go through with it. I stared at the screen for a moment, then deleted it. She was right. She never thought I could surprise her. That was her final mistake. Every choice after that was mine alone. I booked a short trip to the coast, the same place I had once planned to take her. The air was crisp, the sea calm. I watched the waves roll in and realized the storm had already passed. For the first time, my surprise wasn't for her. It was for me. 6 months passed quietly. I had moved into a new apartment downtown, smaller but bright, with tall windows that let in the morning sun. Life had become simple again. I worked long hours, cooked my own meals, and filled my weekends with things I had once abandoned for her schedule. The silence that used to feel heavy had turned into something healing. Every day, I felt further away from the chaos she had brought into my life. One afternoon, I stopped by a cafe near the office. It was a place I had avoided before, mostly because it was close to her old workplace. I ordered coffee and sat by the window, scrolling through design sketches on my tablet. When I looked up, I saw her standing in line. For a moment, I thought my mind was playing tricks. But it was her, unmistakably. Laura. Her posture was the same, confident yet fragile at the edges. She spotted me and froze. Then she forced a smile and walked over, holding her cup like a shield. Her hair was different, shorter and darker, but her eyes carried the same exhaustion I had once tried to heal. She said I looked good. I nodded and told her that I was. She laughed softly, the kind of laugh people use when they are unsure how to exist in front of the person they once betrayed. She asked if she could sit. I gestured to the chair across from me. The conversation started with small talk. She mentioned her new job, said she was back at a smaller firm, and claimed she was happier now. I listened politely. She asked about work, about mutual friends, about my life. I answered simply. No details, no openings. She looked around the cafe, then leaned forward and said she had been meaning to reach out, that she wanted to talk, maybe have dinner to clear the air. I looked at her for a long moment. The same woman who once said I was predictable was now chasing closure from the man she underestimated. I told her there was nothing left to catch. The story was over, and I had already learned its lesson. She tried to smile again, but her eyes faltered. She said quietly that she had really been surprised by how I handled everything. I stood up, placed a few coins on the table for my coffee, and told her that was the idea. As I walked outside, the air felt lighter, almost new. The sky was open and bright, and the noise of the street seemed softer. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in a long time, I felt no weight on my chest. No anger, no bitterness, only calm. I took out my phone and called my mother. She answered with her usual warmth, asking if I had eaten. I told her I was fine and that I had a surprise for her. I was taking her to Paris. For years, I had promised that trip but kept postponing it for work, for bills, for a marriage that had already been dying. Now there were no excuses. I wanted to see the look on her face when she stood under the Eiffel Tower, the same woman who had taught me that loyalty is not about words but presence. She laughed, thinking I was joking, but I told her to start packing. When I hung up, I looked back through the cafe window. Laura was still there, staring at her phone, her coffee untouched. It was strange how someone who once filled every corner of my life now looked like a stranger in the background of my day. That image stayed with me as I walked to the car, not as a wound, but as a quiet confirmation that I had made the right choice. Driving home, I rolled down the windows and let the evening air rush in. The city lights blurred against the windshield, and I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked older, maybe, but stronger. There was no anger left, only gratitude that I had finally stepped out of the story that had been holding me back. That night, I sat on the balcony, watching the city fade into silence. I thought about the years I spent trying to surprise someone who never truly saw me. And then I smiled, realizing that the best surprises aren't meant for others. They are the ones you give yourself when you stop performing for the wrong audience. Peace does not arrive with noise or applause. It slips in quietly when you stop chasing the people who thrive on taking. That night, for the first time in years, I slept without dreaming of what could have been, because I finally understood that what I had gained was far greater than what I lost.